Okay, welcome to processing and our first little stuff that we're going to learn. So in this video, we're going to learn about the size command, we're going to learn about the background command, and we're going to learn just a tiny bit about colors. So first things first, I want to show you what a blank processing sketch does. So this is a blank sketch. I'm going to hit run, and I'm going to get this little window here. That's where all my drawings and stuff are going to appear, but right now it is hella boring. It's also gray. It's not resizable. Let's fix some of that. I'm going to start every processing sketch, even the first ones, by writing some stuff that's not going to make any sense for a while. But I'm going to start by putting it in here, and we'll talk about what it does as we move forward. So the first things I'm going to do are I'm going to write void setup. I'm going to put a couple of parentheses. I'm going to put some curly braces. And then down here, I'm going to write void draw. I'm going to put some parentheses and some curly braces. These need to be named setup and draw, and they need to be named for this. They need to be named this way for a very good reason that is a bit beyond the first day. So trust me, I suppose. We'll get to what these do, I promise. By the end of the course, we'll absolutely 100% understand what these things do. Hell, by the end of the second, maybe third week, you'll definitely understand what these are doing. But right now, it's probably a bit much. So I'm going to hit run on this. That's the little play button here. And I'm going to get exactly the same thing. So writing this stuff doesn't seem to have done anything. It has done something, but it's a little bit past our ability today to know what it did. So the first thing I'm going to do is in the setup method. So this little block here is called the setup method. Anything that's between the curly braces is in the setup method. Don't worry, we'll talk about what methods are and what that word means later. For right now, you just need to know it's between the curly braces, and it's called setup because I wrote the word setup here. So in the setup method, I'm going to write size. I'm going to put some parentheses. I'm going to put a semicolon at the end of the line, and then it's going to tell me a little bit of information here. So right now what it's telling me is the function size expects parameters like size, int, and int. The int part of that means that it's expecting a number. So size is going to control the size of our window. So I'm going to put in here a couple numbers that make sense for a size of a window. So I'm going to go 600 by, let's do 800. Actually, let's make this a little bit exaggerated. So let's go 400 by 800. So you'll note this is going to get a little hard to read if I'm writing lots of stuff in here. In order to make things readable, I really encourage you to hit the Control and T button together on your keyboard. That indented size for me, the Control T is an auto format. You're going to want to use that a lot. I would hit Control T basically every time I hit run on code. It just makes everything a bit more readable. So I'm going to hit run on this, and we're going to get now a different window. So our window now is about twice as tall as it is wide, which ought to tell you that this first coordinate is probably about the width of the window, and the second coordinate is about the height. Now, those of you who have had a little math probably know that the width of something, like this direction, is often described as the x direction, and that's no different in programming. So our 400 is the x size of the window, and the 800 is the y size, essentially. So that's kind of what we're getting for size. You might note something about that first window. So I'm going to teach you a trick here. If you comment this code out, so the way I'm going to comment code out is I'm going to hit Control and then the key with a question mark on it. That's one of these slashies. That's this little slash here. You can type that in manually if you want, or you can hit Control slash. And what that'll do is that'll comment it out, which means that the computer's not going to recognize that code. It's not going to do anything with that code. So I'm going to hit run here, and you'll see that it went back to this size. Now, if I'm thinking about the difference in size, so I'm going to hit Control/ to comment that line back in. I'm going to hit run again. And I'm going to realize that I think that first window is, I mean, it's definitely smaller than 400 by 800, right? So how big is it? You could play with this a little bit and kind of guess. Like, okay, so that's what 200 looks like. It was definitely smaller than that, right? So I'm going to comment this back out and hit play. Yeah, okay, it's definitely smaller than that. You might think to yourself, that's a 100 by 100 window. And it certainly is. So the default size is 100 by 100. Now, this slashy thing, that's called a comment. We're going to use that for a bunch of stuff. So one of the things I'm going to use that for is writing little notes to myself in the code. So I'm going to comment this back in, but right here, I'm going to write myself a little note. So I've got my little slashies, and then here I'm just going to write a note. I'm going to write the default size is 100 by 100. And then I might write myself a second little note. I might say the first number is the width of the window. The second number is the height. I encourage you to keep little notes like this to yourself as you write code. I encourage you not to turn in too much with these, but while you're experimenting, or while we're writing in class, or if I'm doing an example in class, I really encourage you to keep some notes in here. It's a good way to do things. The other thing I really encourage you to do every time you make a sketch, so I'm going to make this window a little bigger so we can see it a little better. Every time you make a sketch, I really encourage you to write a couple of things up top here. So I encourage you to write what it is that you're doing. So this is lecture on size, background, and color. You'll notice I'm getting some error out of this. It's telling me there's a syntax error. So what I'm doing is I'm going to hit Control/, so that's actually a comment. So now that's not throwing an error, it's just a comment. So first thing first should be, what is it that you're doing? Which assignment are you working on? What's your project called? What's your goal today? Like that kind of thing should be that first line. Second line, I usually do something like written by Joe Manlove. That's just get your name in your code so I don't have to wonder whose code is whose. Third thing, I usually write some kind of version controlling stuff here. We're a little bit baby with version control, and that's totally fine. I'm just going to write what day I created this. So I created this 8/22/2026, and then if I update this later, I'll put another comment that'll say something like updated on date to change whatever, right? So that's my kind of header information that I always have in my code. I encourage you to copy these. I'm not going to dock points for you not having them unless it doesn't have your name in it someplace. But I really encourage you to just do this. It's good practice, easy. Okay, next. In Draw, we're going to put a background. So we're going to go background, and I'm going to put something a little bit mysterious here. I'm going to put 255, and then I'm going to put a semicolon. So the semicolon tells the computer that's interpreting your code to say, hey, that's the end of a line, I'm stopping there. Okay? So the semicolons are necessary. If you don't have them and try to run the code, it'll say that you have a syntax error, and then it'll tell you helpfully that maybe you're missing a semicolon. So we're going to put the semicolon back, and we're going to hit run. So now I've got this, which is different. This is different because now it's white. It used to be gray. So if I comment this line out and run it again, I get gray. Don't be afraid to do this. If somebody gives you a piece of code and you want to know what's happening, don't be afraid to comment stuff in and out and see See what changes. This is a pretty good technique. So if I comment this back in, I get white. What if I wanted a little bit of color? So this 255 number is a slightly weird thing. So I'm going to put down here black and white. Actually, I'm going to call it grayscale, which is a little bit. So grayscale is between 0 and 255. So you might note that's 256 numbers, which you might recognize as an important computer thing. The reason for that is that 256 numbers get stored in a byte, 8 bits of code, or 8 bits of memory in the computer. So I've got a grayscale. Grayscale numbers are between 0 and 255. So if I want to make this black, I'm going to put a 0 in, and I'm going to hit run. There's a black screen. If I want to make it gray, I'm going to put in 123 or 122, right? And those are going to give me a kind of dark gray, right? So if I wanted to make a slightly lighter gray, I might go down to, say, 60. That'll give me a more... Oops, sorry. Wrong direction. I went back towards black, right? So 60 is a lower number, right? So that's a darker gray. If I wanted a lighter gray, I might go up a bit. So let's say go up to 200 or something. That's a lighter gray, right? If we wanted a gray that was just shy of white, we might do 245, right? That's almost white, just barely short of it. If we really wanted to make our life hell, we could do 254, which is like just barely not white. Like, my eyes can't tell the difference. Maybe yours can. I had somebody make a horrible game a couple of years ago where all you were doing was trying to pick out the one circle that was slightly whiter than all the others. Terrible. Terrible game. Okay, so grayscale is between 0 and 255. Colors are red. So RGB. So red, green, blue, all 0 to 255. So if I want to make my background, say, purple. Purple's a mix of red and blue, right? So if I want to mix red and blue, I'm going to make all the red on. I'm going to turn green off. And I'm going to put blue all the way on. So this should be lots of red, lots of blue, no green. The way the computer screen actually works, each pixel has essentially has 4 little LEDs in it. The 4 little LEDs are a white LED that's just for brightness, a red LED that's for red, a green one that's for green, and a blue one that's for blue. So right now what I'm doing by telling it I want the background to be 255, 0, 255 is I'm turning all the red LEDs and all the blue LEDs on, leaving the green ones off. So we're going to get this color, which is like, whoa, that's not really purple. The reason it's not really purple is I've got the colors just jacked, right? So they're a little bit too high. So if we kind of split the difference and go down to let's go to 123 in both. Now we should get a more purple color. You don't have to guess on these numbers, by the way. If you want to find some numbers, you can go into the color selector tool, which will bring up this little window over here. And then you can be like, okay, I want a nice shade of purple. So like, here's a purple. This is 134, 15, 209. So I could use those. I could type those in. Or this is just a more condensed way of writing that same number. You can just hit copy there and then paste it in here. I'll teach you to read these number codes at some point. You don't really need to read them right now. You're welcome to just use the 3. That's a bit easier for some folks to read. So maybe go with that if it feels right. This thing's called a hex color. If you want, you can look up a hex converter or something. They exist. And I will teach you how to read those later in the semester. Okay, that's your basics for a little bit on commenting, a little bit on size, a little bit on background, and a little bit on color. In the next videos, we'll talk about shapes and stuff. So I will catch you on the next one.